The answer is no. It's very simple. The conclusion is there is no informed consent. Usually when I give a presentation, I ask the audience, and I've never heard anyone say, oh, actually, I understand. They always say that the 57 pages of terms they're presented with, they don't read. Now, the audiences I present to are pretty educated, tend to be academics and other such likes. But recently our work has taken us down the path of looking at actually how complex these terms and conditions are. And recently published a paper at CHI, just this last year, a tool called Literatum, which is a plugin that anyone can download and install. You cut and paste the terms and conditions in there, and it will tell you the reading age of required to actually just comprehend the English language used. And the vast majority of terms and conditions require degree level education. So we have already taken out, 50, 60, 70% of the population who simply cannot understand terms and conditions. So there is no way that we can actually say that they have been informed. Now, there's plenty of other places where we deal with this problem of complexity in terms of conditions and informed consent, and that is we don't use informed consent, and rather we adopt consumer protection. We prevent people from providing dangerous products to people because it is unreasonable to expect everyone, every time they're in the supermarket, to have to engage in informed consent about whether the food they're buying is fit for human consumption. We do not do that. And in the digital world, we need to move into this realm. The change from informed consent to consumer protection can only be done through regulation. It's not something that any company is suddenly going to adopt, because without the legal framework in place to describe what it means to have consumer protection around personal data, then it sort of doesn't make sense. There's nothing for them to work against and use as a reference. And it's very disappointing that we didn't get this into the data protection regulation that's going to go through, because it will be many years, I fear, before the EU will be getting around to reviewing data protection legislation again. To start to adopt, attitudes towards privacy by design, where we think first and foremost about how we will design the service to be private in the first place. There are many services today that the easiest technical solution is, we just gather all the data and put it in a big database in the cloud, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And technically that's a simple solution, absolutely massively privacy invading. Whereas there are solutions where you leave the data where it is, you send the code to the data, let the data reside on the user's devices, and provide them with the value on their mobile phone or on their PC without ever sharing the data. They're slightly more complex. It's harder to achieve, but I think that many people would start to appreciate privacy by design, which is a topic that, given what we have seen certain government agencies have been doing, I think is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now, which is how do we move away from these massively centralized systems. Let's look at editing in the cloud, where the file is in the cloud and using a web browser which accesses a word processing application in the cloud. There is no observability of what happens with the data, hence there is no possibility of audit. So that is not privacy by design. That is it's not even an attempt at privacy by design. It's perhaps trust by design. I have to trust that organization, and I have to trust everyone who works for it. And although I don't think that the human condition is particularly bad, there are some people out there who might seek at a personal level, not at a corporate level, but at a personal level, to benefit from the fact that they could breach that trust. So these mechanisms, where you design a system that essentially relies on a massive degree of trust and then say you still have your privacy, simply are not doing privacy by design. When I look at the way in which a lot of the systems today use personal information, it's very important to understand that what you observe as the user of these systems, which is you're handing over information in return for a free service, and your perception is that the revenue for this service is made from advertising, that's configured for you based on whatever's in your email or whatever you've been discussing. And at that level, you might imagine that your personal information is a currency. There's been an exchange, and you might ask a question about whether that degree of privacy invasion, as in sharing that information in return for targeted advertising, is that a good exchange? However, that's the tip of the iceberg. What most people don't realize is that these companies run what are called multi-sided markets. I and my interaction with the company is only one side of the market. We need to look at who that company sells derived information from, so that the value that is generated in the other market, for example, the information that's sold to marketeers, run an advertising campaign in a few states in North America, and then get a very tailored response back from a search engine or a social networking site saying, people in that geography were talking about the programs and the adverts or whatever. You're getting direct feedback, and most people don't realize that's going on. And that's a very high value channel, which we don't have visibility of, so that I resist thinking of personal information as currency, because my view is that if I have dollars and I exchange them for pounds, someone's not taking 90% of the value somewhere else. It's a fair exchange. Whereas a lot of the personal information is generating a vast amount of value in the other side, in this multi-sided market. And I am seeing none of that value. That's going into the share price of those companies. And it's not, I have got a very poor deal on that trade. That's one of the reasons that I, for one, avoid using most of those services. I think that what is being exploited here is folks' ignorance about the value that's actually present in their data, and just look at how many people really want to get hold of your data. In fact, it's become almost a disease that everyone wants to grab all your data and put it in the cloud. Take a very simple example. There are technologies that synchronize our files across our computers. Let's take SkyDrive, Google Drive, and of course the one that most people first came across was Dropbox. And these are great, very, very convenient. Synchronize all your files across all the computer, and they give you a backup in the cloud so that you can always get to it. And of course the copy in the cloud is the copy that's always there. So even if you only have one device, it can always synchronize with the cloud. There are other technologies, some of them commercial, things like SpiderOak, where it synchronizes all of your files across your computers, but it keeps an encrypted copy in the cloud. So they are unable to extract any value out of the data that they hold because it's all encrypted and they can't see it. So they have to charge immediately for that. Whereas other companies can actually offer a free service because they're able to extract value from the data that they hold. But then there are other technologies like BitTorrent Sync or a commercial product, AeroFS, which synchronize all your computers by putting them in touch with each other, but don't keep a copy in the cloud. And their BitTorrent Sync, other than running a very simple service that points the computers at each other so that they can contact each other, they have very few overheads. And that's a freely available technology. So they don't have costs of hosting all the data, so they don't have to run a multi-sided market to cover those costs. And those are the technologies that, in my view, have engaged in privacy by design. I actually would really love to see Which Magazine or someone like that, Consumer Association, starting to publish 5 stars for privacy for applications as a ranking system to try and get that concept into into people's heads. It requires, in my view, so getting every individual to engage in the discussion and the thought process around what the deal is, how privacy invading this is, I think is extremely complex. But having information sources, a bit like food labeling, this is a very bad service for privacy. 1 star or -1 star, whereas this is a very good service, 5 stars, given by a trusted and independent voice like the Consumers Association, may be a very good way to proceed.